apologize. I thank you for understanding. Owen, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Rodney, it's so nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I last month in our previous episode of New York Shakespeare Live had a chance to speak with your colleague in arms, and that was Lisa Ann Goldsmith, with whom you do your podcast. And Owen, I have to tell you, you guys have such a fun, cheeky podcast, and I almost I almost blush when I say the name because it's called the Bardcast. It's Shakespeare, you dick.
It's Shakespeare, you dick. Don't blush. Don't blush.
And your screen name is even makes me chuckle whenever I see it. It's Owen the Disturbing, right?
That that's the reason for that is, I mean, a lot of people have a jocular Instagram handle. I always felt that if I ever became emperor of the world, I wouldn't want to be known as Owen the Great or Owen the Terrible, but I thought Owen the Disturbing would be a good sobriquet.
Well, if that isn't as good an introduction to your sense of humor as any, I don't know what is. So between Owen the Disturbing and the Bardcast, it's Shakespeare, you dick. And we heard it last month from Lisa. But why don't you, for people that are joining us for the first time that didn't have a chance to see that interview, why don't you give us a quick recap
Where
of
it came
where
from.
that name comes from?
Okay, well, first of all, I have to say it's very weird, and it's very weird to be on with Jason O'Connell. It's great. Jason and Lisa and I actually met in the same place. Back years ago, Jason and Lisa and I all worked at the Jekyll and Hyde Club on 6th.
Oh, I remember that place. I
Back
remember it
then,
well.
where many actors had, date survival jobs,
Hmm.
which, were more fun than some. We weren't waiting tables, we were performers doing improv and that kind of thing. And I will say
Right.
this when he comes out, maybe you can make him do this. You haven't lived until you've seen Jason O'Connell perform Mr. Hyde as rerun from What's Happening, which I actually had to do one.
I can only imagine.
But
I can only imagine.
a little similarly to the Jekyll and Hyde Club,
Hmm.
the New York Renaissance Fair, where even longer ago, Lisa Ann and I worked, not together, ironically. We didn't meet until Jekyll and Hyde, but there's a famous story because the Ren Fair used to have equity performers.
Hmm.
They would do a Shakespeare play every year, like a full-on, well-produced, often very good Shakespeare play.
Hmm.
I got my health insurance 3 years in a row doing those plays, so I have fond memories. But the situation is interesting there because what happens is if you buy your ticket to the New York Renaissance Fair, you can see pretty much all the attractions that you want to see. Um,
Hmm.
so people would come to the Globe Theater, as they called it, this beautiful little theater outdoors in the woods, about 700 seats, and they'd fill up before the show. But then people would kind of realize after a scene or two that, well, this is going to keep going, right? This is not just scenes from, it's going to be like all of As You Like It or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So some people would kind of get up and leave, and about half of them would stay, and everybody understood, and it worked out just fine. But at this one performance, I think it was a 12th night, I want to say early 90s,
Hmm.
there were a couple of guys like in the second row, very close to the actors, biker guys.
Hmm.
Bikers love the Ren Fair. Don't ask me why. But hey, I cannot tell you why. Anyway,
Right.
so
Okay.
huge guys like in the leather cuts and all of that.
Hmm.
They're getting up and they're trying to be polite. They're like, excuse me, pardon me, like getting out of the row.
Hmm.
But their conversation is overheard by everyone in the audience and the actors as they're trying to scooch out. And the conversation goes like this. Biker number one says, "Hey, what was that?" And biker number two says, "What was that? It's Shakespeare, you dick." So, of course, it became a legendary story at the fair. And when Lisa Ann and I were talking about making a podcast about a year ago, we thought, well, that story is so famous and so funny, it has to be in the title. And it's also our sense of humor. And it's sort of, if you've listened to the podcast, so you know,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
I know, but listen, I say it all in jest. The it's Shakespeare, you dick, and the Owen the Disturbing. It's really just it's a entry point into your sense of humor, and you guys have a really fun. It's just a lot of fun banter. You guys have. I was listening today to the I think it's the most recent podcast episode where you're
Oh,
talking.
original Shakespeare?
I'm sorry.
The sports and games one.
Right. The recreational Shakespeare, right?
Mm.
Where you're talking about the different sports and games, and I think you were handling all the ones where the guys beat each other up, and Lisa Ann was handling all the ones where people deceive each other or whatever it was.
Did you guess our April Fools
I,
joke?
I don't I don't think I caught that part of it.
So we slipped in there. We said at the end of the episode, for anybody that wants to listen to the episode, this is sort of a spoiler alert. There's a ton of weird sports and games that Elizabethans and Jacobians played. And yes, a lot of them do involve deception or beating the crap out of each other. But we thought because we were recording on April Fool's Day, in the spirit of the day and in the spirit of the podcast, we slipped in 2 fake games. And
I missed that part of it. Okay.
we announced at the end of the episode that if anybody guessed what the fake games were, they could get swag. Well, let me ask you this, Rodney.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me, shall I read you one real one and one fake one and see if you can tell which is which?
Go for it. Let's do it.
So here are 2 games from Shakespeare's time. You tell me which is real and which is fake. The first one is called Dead Man's Dropsy.
Mm-hmm.
And the description is this. This is a game played by law students at the Inns of Court. The object was for young men to hold a heavy object for as long as possible and to outlast his fellows. The first person to drop the object would incur the penalty of being kicked repeatedly in the shins and made to wear a dress to class the following day.
I remember that one. Okay.
Here's the second one, a game called Box About.
Mm-hmm.
This game is played when one person punches the person next to him as hard as they can, declaring, "Box About." The punched person must then punch another in the group and so on until everyone except the person who started has been punched. This means the last person doesn't get to punch anyone, so you don't want to be the last person.
I feel like Box About is something that happened in college. And so I feel like that's the real one.
Very good. I'm impressed. We're going to have to send you swag, Rodney. You got it. Dead Man's Dropsy is made up. The other one we made up was called Whorebag, but I won't read that one.
And people can catch all the details about these games and many others that you detail in in your podcast, and that is the Bardcast. It's Shakespeare, you dick, and you and Lisa, and again, you have such wonderful rapport with each other. You before the podcast, you guys before the coronavirus lockdown, you guys were doing a ton of work together in the live performance space. You were doing, I think you guys had, again, the Protean Players. Is that right? The Protean Theater?
It's actually some time ago. Lisa Ann and I were involved with a company called the Protean Theater Company, mostly in the late 90s and early aughts.
Okay.
And Lisa Ann we've worked together a lot. We've done a lot of things together. But Lisa Ann moved to Pittsburgh in the mid-aughts, and we've remained best friends all through everything, but we haven't had the opportunity to work together in a live, not in the little rectangles in time, and we're definitely hoping to change that and work together live soon.
Now, I was looking through your resume. You have an extensive resume as a director, and as an actor, as a producer, as everything. And I think you are an educator as well. I think you're a teacher as well. So you're all over the place with your contributions to the scene. But I think you did some work recently with one of the groups that does outdoor Shakespeare in Queens. That's the Hip to Hip Theater, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was listening to. It's funny. This episode it's weird that I would be on because there's a lot. You're seeing the people next week that do the Shakespeare in the parks around the city. Which yes, I've worked with Hip to Hip quite a bit. I should mention also. Ms. Robbins was on the show earlier. I have not had a chance to meet her, but my brother-in-law, Stephen Kunkin, was in the Apple Plays with her. And
right.
I know. This plays, so, you know. But yeah, I worked with Hip to Hip as an actor in the, I want to say 2008, 2009. And after that, I ran away and left the circus for a while and went back to school and got a couple of degrees. And I came back and I started teaching at Marymount Manhattan College, where Jason Marr, who's the artistic director of Hip to Hip, also teaches. And he saw a show that I directed there, and we started talking about maybe me directing for them, which I did. I ended up directing Measure for Measure and later also All That Ends Well. And I really have not acted in a long time. But Jason, at that meeting, out of nowhere, asked me if I would play Falstaff for them and I was like, well, I'd come out of retirement to do that.
Right, so, absolutely.
So that one season, it's about 4 years ago now, I ended up directing Measure and playing Falstaff at the same time, which was, kept me busy.
That's kept you busy. Now coming up next for what you guys have, you not only have the podcast, it's the Bardcast, it's Shakespeare Dick, but you also have started as of last month or a couple of months ago to do full-on Zoom productions. You did Macbeth a couple of months ago, and coming up later this month at the end of April, you have As You Like It, correct?
That is correct. On Shakespeare's birthday, in fact.
Shakespeare's birthday. What better way to celebrate?
His probable birthday, of course.
Right.
On April 23rd and 24th. What happened was Lisa Ann and I got together when everybody, of course, was devastated a year ago and trying to figure out what the hell to do. And we came up with the idea of the podcast, but also in an effort to keep ourselves sane, we decided to invite friends that we know. And as you were talking before about the virtues of Zoom theater, we have so many friends all across the country and even in different countries. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun to get together and, read a Shakespeare play?
Right.
On Zoom, we can do that. We started to do that, and everybody really enjoyed it. And the people, we're so blessed to know such talented people. So every couple of weeks, we would get together on Sundays and read another Shakespeare play. And we've done it regularly. I think we've done 24 of them now.
Wow.
And it's come to be known amongst us as Shakespeare Sunday. Very casual, often cold, that kind of thing. But the people are so good, and friends and family would ask to see them, and they'd be invited. And people started to talk to me and Lisa Ann about, well, why don't you do these? Why don't you make them more accessible to people? Because these are closed readings. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. And then along the way, I started to direct some other more produced Zoom theater for places like Gallery Players and Westchester Theater, Schoolhouse Theater of Westchester. So a little more elaborate with some rehearsal and some costume pieces and backgrounds and props and that kind of thing. And so a few months ago, Lisa Ann and I decided to take it to another level, as it were, and actually make the next step. So we did that with the Scottish play, which I directed. And now on Shakespeare's birthday and the day after, we're going to be doing As You Like It, which Lisa Ann is going to direct. And I actually get to be directed for her.
Wow.
Very first time.
Very exciting. Shakespeare would approve, I'm sure. That's very, very exciting. So people can come over to your Facebook page. That's the Bardcast, you Dick. You leave out the Shakespeare. The Bardcast, you Dick, and they can.
And our website.
And our website.
Bardcastyoudick.com.
Thebardcastyoudick.com. And it's not .org because that wouldn't flow. Thebardcastyoudick.com. There's more of that the comedy K sounds connected. So they can join you there and find out everything about the podcast and also about As You Like It. And I can't wait to check it out. Your previous presentation was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see this one as well. So thank you for waiting for the later stage of the broadcast, and it's a pleasure to finally chat with you, Owen. Best of luck with the podcast, with the show, and I'll be waiting for the swag to arrive.
Of course, we'll make sure you get it, Rodney.
Thank you. You can email it to me. I think send it as a PDF.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you very much, Owen. It's a pleasure.
So long, Rodney.
Okay. All right. So again.